Few words strike more fear into a student's heart than these: standardized testing. And, of course, reading question after question is hardly anyone's idea of fun. However, standardized tests have proven not only to be taxing and agitating, but also to be inimical measures of student progress. Although originally developed as a way to nationalize the effectiveness of teachers and the qualifications of students, standardized testing has recently been under fire for the robotic and unequal way it treats students as learners. Gary Gutting sums this up well. Tests must require or demonstrate some valuable knowledge or skill, like knowing how to multiply, understanding the Civil War, or being able to think critically. It is entirely possible for students to fail tests on such topics and still have, for example, the mathematical abilities or historical knowledge we want. If, for example, a math test required mentally multiplying 392 times 654 in 5 seconds, or a history test required knowing the precise date of 50 Civil War battles, we would not be concerned that students did not pass. Furthermore, tying student standardized test scores to funding punishes underfunded schools and further reduces their students' opportunities for success. To explore the controversial issue of standardized testing, we've developed several research questions that we will answer in this video. How was standardized testing adopted? How does the testing system and its funding work? Do these tests accurately measure an individual's intelligence? Do the tests assess students equally? How are students affected? What alternatives are there?
Standardized testing began around 100 years ago when the National Education Association began endorsing the development of standardized tests. And by 1930, multiple choice tests were firmly established in the American education system.
Well, the explosion of testing can be traced back to the 90s, when you probably remember stories like these about the state of public education.
When 40 nations recently took the International Math and Science test, American students scored near the bottom.
And that must have hurt.
The United States needed a way to ensure the unity of the curriculum and progress among its varied schools with efficiency and objectivity. Even back then, critics were concerned with students memorizing material to obtain good test scores.
Repeat after me. Akaka, dabica, akakaka.
Akaka, dabica, akakaka.
But as you can see, they still continue to be the most common testing method today.
One of the most recent attempts to reform the education system in the United States was the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. The act required that all states develop assessments in basic skills such as math, reading, and writing. For schools to receive federal funding, they had to administer these basic skills tests to all students. Although the No Child Left Behind Act had good intentions, it was heavily critiqued. And by 2015, bipartisan Congress had removed the majority of the national features of the act, replacing it with the Every Student Succeeds Act, which takes effect in the 2017-2018 school year. Standardized testing is still required with this revised act, even though there was resistance from many parents requesting to lower the amount of tests administered. The Every Student Succeeds Act will put accountability plans in place, which will hold them accountable to reach certain goals such as proficiency on tests, student engagement rates, access to advanced coursework, among others, where each state will have to submit their plans to the Education Department.
For public schools to receive access to federal funding, they are required to test every student. To make adequate yearly progress, AYP, the school must test 95% of its students, and penalties only apply to schools receiving Title I funds if they don't meet this requirement.
What gets tested gets taught, where the only thing that's being covered is test preparation, and not even the knowledge on the test, but how to take the test.
The fairness of these standardized tests is often questioned. How can students with different backgrounds, cognitive abilities, and different problem-solving methods be expected to deliver the exact same quality of work? Well, the short answer is they can't. Most standardized tests do not measure the ability to think critically or creatively in any field. For multiple choice questions in particular, they are only really testing quick answers to superficial questions. Standardized testing also does not reflect how an individual learns or problem solves. Understanding how students learn best and how to effectively teach critical and exploratory thinking is the kind of data sourcing we need today, rather than the almost 90-year-old standard, multiple choice questions, that is currently in use.
In addition to teaching rote memorization rather than the application of knowledge, students from privileged backgrounds score significantly higher on standardized tests than underprivileged students. The 1992 National Assessment of Education Progress proved that 89% of math results on state standardized tests are determined by 4 variables: the number of parents living at home, parents' educational background, type of community, and poverty rate. This shouldn't be surprising. These factors help to determine what types of learning experiences the student has access to outside of school to enhance their in-school learning. It makes sense that having parents to help you do homework or being exposed to things like conferences, performances, and workshops would improve your test scores.
Most people would agree that instead of punishing largely underprivileged populations of students by reducing their funding, we should find other ways to incentivize good teaching and learning that will fix the root problem rather than perpetuate it. Thus, the question isn't if we should fix the problem of standardized education, but how. Several alternatives to standardized testing have been proposed and considered, but none have been nationally implemented yet. The 4 main alternatives are sampling, stealth assessment, observing a combination of statistics from schools, and inspections. Sampling would test a small group of students each year who are assumed to be representative of the school population. Because the sample includes different students annually, they would not have to worry about being tested each year, which would reduce some stress. Nonetheless, this doesn't address the other issues of standardized testing, such as teaching memorization rather than understanding.
Another alternative is stealth assessment. This method tests students by using practice programs from textbooks and tutoring companies and allows measurement of progress over time instead of a one-day analysis.
What stealth assessment does, that's what I've been working on, is the idea where you pull out directly from the gameplay itself and make inferences back.
This big picture approach could be built into the student's regular work and reduces the influence of test anxiety on performance. Unfortunately, because this program that would measure the progress is still new, it would be costly to implement and would take time. However, this is definitely a good alternative that will only become easier to implement as time goes on.
The third alternative is to combine multiple statistics from schools to analyze their success. According to NPR, these statistics would probably include graduation rates, discipline outcomes, demographic information, teacher-created assessments, and, eventually, workforce outcomes. Using multiple measures to determine success would make computations more holistic and, hopefully, more fair. Lastly, inspections provide an interesting alternative that has been utilized in Scotland for years. There, inspectors observe lessons, student work, and teacher plans to determine a school's progress. This is a great alternative because, in addition to measuring success, it provides a better way to determine how to improve lack of success. The inspectors see exactly what happens in the school and can offer personalized advice.
There are many different questions about how to regulate the vastly different schools that comprise the U.S. education system, but most people agree that standardized testing as it stands now is ineffective in resolving the variation in the quality of learning and teaching across the country. The almost 100-year-old system is due for an upgrade. While the future of standardization is unclear, it is imperative that we use any standardization process to find and eliminate the root problems of our education system. Not simply to allocate funding to high-achieving schools and continue to underfund failing schools, we must find a sustainable way to change our education system so that every student has an equal opportunity to succeed. Raising the next generation to engineer, compromise, and plan for a better future depends on this.